Prithvi Shantirantariksha Shantir Dyau Shantir Disha Shantiravantara Disha Shantiragni Shantir Vayu Shantiraditya Shantish Chandrama Shantir Nakshatrani Shantirapasshantiroshadaya Shantir Vanaspataya Shantir Gau Shantiraja Shantirashvashantir Purusha Shantir Brahma Shantir Brahmana Shantir Shantireva Shanti Shantir Me Astu Shantihi. May there be peace on earth and in the sky. May there be peace in the water and in all directions. May there be peace in the plants, in the trees, and in animals. May there be peace in the hearts of all beings. May there be peace in everyone and in everything. Sarvetra Sukhinas Santu, Sarve Santu Niramayaha, Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu, Ma Kaschid Dukkha Bhag Bhavet, Sarvastaratu Durgani, Sarvo Bhadrani Pashyatu, Sarvas Sadbuddhimapnotu, Sarvas Sarvatra Nandatu. May all be happy and healthy. May all see what is good, and may no one experience misery. May all overcome their obstacles and acquire good tendencies. May people everywhere find joy and fulfillment. Let us now spend some time touching the center of peace and joy in our hearts. A good way to begin the practice is to withdraw the scattered energies of the mind and bring them to rest on one point. That point can be our own breathing. Let us therefore practice breathing with awareness. As we breathe in, let us visualize that our body and mind are being filled with love, strength, and compassion. And as we breathe out, let us release all the stress, anxiety, and exhaustion in the body and mind. Let us practice this way for a while. Let us now turn our attention to the region of our heart. Although God is present everywhere and in everyone, the divine presence can be felt most clearly in our hearts. We can meditate in any way we have been taught. To remain focused, we can take the help of a short mental prayer or a mantra or a divine name. Let us now spend some time dwelling on the presence of God in our hearts. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om. Oh, Om Asatoma Satkamaya Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya Aviravirmaheti Rudrayatte Dakshinam Mukham Tenamam Pahi Nityam. May the Divine lead us from the unreal to the real, from darkness to light, from death to immortality. May the Divine Consciousness fill our hearts and protect us. Our subject today is to do or not to do. So the song that we did just now, it's based on chapter 12 of the Gita, which describes the kind of qualities a person must have. A person who sees himself or herself as a devotee of God, what are the kind of qualities such a person must have? What kind of qualities would make a person dear to God? I mean, that's the phrase that occurs in that chapter. Such a person is dear to me. Such a person is dear to me. In fact, those of you who have been either attending or following the discussion we have on Wednesdays, we recently completed studying the 12th chapter. And one of the kind of homeworks we did was to make a list of all the qualities Krishna mentions in that chapter and see that our own present life and our own present qualities, how much do we measure up to the kind of quality necessary for a spiritual seeker. And I must congratulate those of you who did that assignment. And almost all of you have written back to say how much that exercise was helpful. In fact, all study, whether you study from books or what you hear through lectures or in retreats, would be useful because hearing is often a very passive activity. Now, while we get ideas from books or lectures, now those ideas, if they are to find root in our lives, not simply in our heads, but also in our hearts, then there must be some response from our sides. And one way of responding to that would be to reflect on whatever it is that we have heard, not simply on the Sunday lectures here or anywhere, but all the ideas that come to us from different sources. We must kind of reflect on them, see which of those are relevant to our own life, to our own present situation. And if something makes sense, if something resonates with our head and heart, then the next thing we need to ask is, how much does my life correspond to these ideals which make sense to me? Because oftentimes this divergence between what makes sense or what we believe to be right and our daily life, that oftentimes doesn't, there's a big bridge, there's a big gap which needs to be bridged. And spiritual progress is determined not by how much we have heard or how much we have read, but how much we have been successful in bridging that gap. And to whatever little an extent we are able to bridge that gap, to whatever little an extent our life corresponds to what we believe to be right and good and true, to that extent we experience bliss, peace, and fulfillment in life. And that is why not just the Gita, but many of these scriptures describe the qualities that these enlightened beings or people who are closer to God or dear to God show or manifest in their life. The idea is whatever qualities or whatever characteristics an enlightened being has, the rest of us who are striving for enlightenment must try to practice, must try to cultivate. The Gita is primarily a text for practice. It's a brilliant summary of the Vedantic wisdom. In fact, the Vedas are just too vast. There's hardly, I don't think there's not even one person, either in contemporary times or in the past, who can say, well, I have read the whole Vedas. Not possible. And it's not even necessary. The advantage of these other texts, especially the Gita, is that, as Swami Vivekananda said, it's a brilliant summary to encapsulate that wisdom in such a manageable length. And that is what the Gita achieves. The Gita spells out both the principles of the Vedantic wisdom and what we need to do in our life to live according to those principles. And we see, again, many of you are familiar with the text, and if you're not, at least you have a general idea. If not, then I would encourage you to get a copy and look at it. The Gita begins with a kind of a dilemma that Arjuna has. So it's the historical backdrop to the study of the Gita is this story of a dynasty. And these two sets of cousins, there's a fight over the kingdom. Who the one who is entitled or one who is rightful, one who should get that seat of power is denied that. And so obviously, just as in many of these great epics, it's the battle between the forces of good and the forces of evil. And so they meet on the battlefield. And here is this Arjuna, the protagonist of the good guys. He has this dilemma. What should I do? What's the right thing for me to do in this case? So one option is to fight for a just cause. That yes, I need to fight because this is the right thing to do. On the other hand, as we know, no fight, no war is a pretty sight. Because war involves killing, violence, children being orphaned, women being widowed, families getting disrupted, normal life just being shattered. And so it's not so much a choice in this case between good or bad, but often a choice, and that's the kind of choices we have asked to make in life as well. In fact, choosing between good and bad is much easy. It's really very easy. Just choose the good. That's it. What's not so easy is choosing between different shades of gray. And a lot of choices in life are not so clear-cut. Not a choice simply between good and bad. It's sometimes a choice between bad and worse. And if it's a choice between bad and worse, then you are choosing bad, not because the bad is good, but the bad is better than the worse. And that's the kind of dilemmas we'll face in life, to do or not to do some things. As I said, if it's a very clear-cut choice, there is no dilemma. The dilemma is only when you see pluses and minuses on both sides. That's when it becomes a little tricky. So Arjuna's dilemma was, should I fight this war or should I withdraw from it? Is it the right thing for me to do or is it the wrong thing for me to do this? Even, in fact, as I mentioned last time, the title of today's talk was inspired by the great dilemma of Hamlet, to be or not to be. That's the question. Now, although there's this that's probably one of the best or most known soliloquies in Shakespeare's writings. And there's this big question about life and death. So although the dilemma seems to be between to be or not to be, but at the heart of it, it's also a dilemma for Hamlet, or to do or not to do. Should he resist the suffering that has come upon him, or should he not? Should he take revenge, or should he not? So it's this dilemma between to do or not to do that in its extreme form takes this form of to be or not to be. And as I said, although we may not be called upon always to make choices of such earth-shattering consequences, but even in our daily life, in these little things in daily life, we are called to make choices. And sometimes the choices are not easy. And so the question to do or not to do is a kind of a universal dilemma. Sometime or the other, in fact, on sometime or the other, on a daily basis, we might face these kind of questions. Now, while dilemmas are inevitable, and there's nothing really wrong in having dilemmas itself, as I said, that's inevitable, but remaining for a long time in an indecisive state is a problem. Because remaining undecided for a long time can weaken us. It can produce a lot of uncertainty, it can produce a lot of stress, a lot of anxiety. So while it's true on one hand that we don't have to make choices or take decisions recklessly, just doing it, that doesn't make sense either, because a lot of mistakes can occur that way. So we need to be thoughtful, we need to take our time before making important decisions. At the same time, how much time should we take? So the fear that we may make a wrong choice, the fear that we might decide wrongly, might make us want to postpone the decision for an indefinite period. So if we remain indecisive for a long time, that can be weakening too. So there has to be some kind of a balance. Don't rush into doing things, but don't remain indecisive for a long time. So what we should do or what we shouldn't do is really a matter of recognizing what our duty is in a given situation and what our duty is not. Now, duties and responsibilities all of us have. I think it will be very difficult to find a person who is reasonable, who is relatively sane, who can say that, well, we all have our duties, we all have our responsibilities in life. Now, some of us find at least some of our duties boring, and there are some of us who seem to enjoy the duties that they have. The Gita says, and many of these texts and many of these great spiritually advanced souls of past and present have repeatedly taught us that doing our duties in a right way can bring us perfection, fulfillment, peace. So it all boils down to how we approach the work that we have to do. Some of the things that we have to do in life are a matter of choice. But a lot of the things that we have to do in life are not so much a matter of choice. We just have to do it. So how we handle the different duties we have determines how much of peace and joy we experience in our daily life. We know that today things we see that there is a greater emphasis on not so much on duties but on rights. There is the Bill of Rights. There is no Bill of Duties. People speak about fundamental rights. We don't hear about fundamental duties. But we recognize that there cannot be any rights unless there are also duties. But this kind of a lopsided emphasis on rights and not so much on duties has created lots of problems. Because while everyone's become more conscious about what their rights are, I don't think they have become conscious that alongside every right comes a duty. And one of the first duties is to respect the rights of others. Otherwise there's chaos, and in a large measure, that is exactly what the situation is. So what we need is a systematic study of the nature of duties, their purpose and necessity in life. In short, a kind of a philosophy of duty, a personal philosophy of duty would be very helpful for every one of us. The word for duty that is often used in Vedanta is dharma. Now, dharma is a very dharma is a Sanskrit word which has got shades of meaning. It's a very comprehensive term. But one of the ways the word dharma is used is in a sense of duty. Dharma, if you go to the etymological root meaning of the term dharma, it really means dharayate, that which holds things together. To some extent, the word religion, even you go to the root meaning of the term, it's something closer, that which holds, whether it holds a community together, holds a person together. So dharma is a little bit like that. And duty is one of the very important meanings in which dharma is understood. So then, let's begin with the basic question, or what is duty? The problem in answering that question is that giving an objective definition of duty is very difficult, very problematic, because the moment you start making a list like this act is a duty and this act is not a duty, becomes a problem, because every kind of an activity is so much dependent on the context. For instance, for a soldier at war, on the battlefront, now killing as many of the enemy soldiers, that's the duty of those in the armed forces. That would be a right thing. In fact, we honor and we give medals to those who when say this person has been very brave and has killed so many of the enemy soldiers, and we kind of, this person is honored in society. But in peacetime, if somebody goes and kills, now that's a crime. Now we say, well, is killing a duty or not a duty? Again, that would depend on who does it, where it is done, and so the context makes all the difference. And therefore, to define duty in terms of activities itself is very difficult, because everything needs to be contextualized in many different ways. For instance, now there are certain kinds of foods in different religious traditions. Some religions say certain kinds of food should not be eaten, or some kind of food should be eaten. Now, for people in that tradition, if that tradition to which they belong, they say this food shouldn't be eaten, then not eating that food will be doing their duty, or eating that food will be not doing their duty, and so on. Again, so that will vary from one's belief system and one's identities with different traditions. A subjective definition of duty is much easier. And in a general way, Swami Vivekananda does that in his talks on Karma Yoga. He says it's possible to say that anything that goes to make me more unselfish, that is my duty. Any work or any activity that makes me more selfish, that's not my duty. Again, it's a very general definition, but this is something that can be applied no matter to what activity, because this seems to be a more subjective in nature, because it shows the effect on the person who is practicing these things. For a spiritual seeker, for those who take spiritual life seriously, the same thing can be rephrased this way. We could say that any work or any activity that takes me closer to God or closer to my spiritual ideal, that's my duty. Anything that takes me away from my spiritual ideal is not my duty. Oftentimes, Swami Vivekananda identified spiritual life itself with strength. And so it's also possible to define duty subjectively in saying anything that helps me become stronger. And that strength can be experienced and cultivated at different levels. It could be physical strength, moral strength, emotional strength, intellectual strength. Again, anything that goes to make me stronger, that's my duty. Anything that goes to make me weaker in at any of these different levels is not my duty. So there are many different ways of understanding or recognizing whether a particular work is my duty or not in this subjective way. If we look at some of the old Vedanta texts, they do all these different kind of classifications. And one way of classifying all dharma, all duty, was that all duties were divided into two categories. One was a general duty and one was a specific duty. The general duty in Sanskrit was called sadharana. Sadharana means general. So sadharana dharma, general duty or universal duty. And specific duty was called vishesha. Vishesha in Sanskrit means specific. So vishesha dharma and sadharana dharma. Now what are the general duties? General duties, obviously by the term itself, it's clear that something that's applicable to all, no matter what specifics, other specifics they may have, but something that is universal, and such as living truthfully, compassion, non-violence, helping others. Now all these are duties enjoined upon all, no matter what age you belong to, doesn't matter what occupation you have or which part of the world you come from. So that's why they are called general duties. Now specific duties would depend on, again, one's own specific situation. That can vary from one's occupation or whatever one's livelihood is. It can vary from one's age group. It can vary from the different stages in life. And we know that the duty of a priest or the duty of a soldier, the duty of a businessman, clearly everyone of them has duties, but these duties are very specific to what they have to do in their daily life. Similarly, the duties based on relationships, the duty of parents, the duties of children, again, they're different depending again on the different stages. The duties we have as students, the duties we have when we grow up and then start families of our own. The duties of grandparents, again, or the duty of someone who has renounced everything. And so the duties of monks or the duties of hermits. So it's different stages, different age groups will have different duties, and therefore they are called the specific duties. And therefore the Gita discusses a lot about these duties, because that's still the dilemma Arjuna had in the Gita. What is my duty at this juncture of life? And so there is this one term that comes in the Gita called swadharma. Swa means self, dharma. So what is my duty? So it is great to have this general discussion about specific duties and general duties and so on. What really would be most relevant to every one of us is to ask the question to ourselves, well, what is my duty? And again, as I said, some of these duties will remain unchanged all through life. Like with age, duty to be truthful and honest doesn't change with age. No matter that will remain with us all through life. On the other hand, the other duty based on our age, on our occupation, and so on, that will change. So at every stage, we need to ask ourselves, what is my present duty in life? Now, some of these duties may also need to be prioritized. Again, and on what parameters we apply and prioritizing our duties will vary again, depending on one's own value system. So for a spiritual seeker, any duty that's directly related to that spiritual ideal would often be higher up on the list than other duties. Again, just like the choice between good and bad, the choice between a duty or a not duty is easy. If you have to choose between two things and one of that is a duty and the other is not duty, well, you choose what's your duty. That's clear. What do you do when you have to choose between two sets of duties? Both are your duties, and if you're called upon to carry out your duties at the same time in two different places, now that's, so far at least, even science hasn't been able to do it, that you can be in two different places at the same time doing two different things. So at such time, then we'll have to use prioritize that, well, I have this duty and I have this other duty, and I can't do both at the same time. So at some time I'll have to decide, well, this duty is more important and this duty is less important. So we will never be able to do everything that we ought to do, because there are going to be these conflicts. There are going to be these times when I'll have to choose one over the other. And that's again the question that will come, to do or not to do, or to do this or to do that. And for spiritual seekers, as I said, the criteria that would be applied that time would be that any duty which takes me closer to God would be preferred over some other duty which may not be taking me so much closer to God. Again, it's all like different shades of gray or different shades of orange. You just choose the color you want, but they are just different shades. So, assuming, of course, that whatever we have to do is ethical and moral, in Vedanta, it doesn't so much matter what you have to do as how you do it. And that brings into focus an important question. Is there any work which is intrinsically higher or any work which is intrinsically lower? And in the spirit of Karma Yoga, all work is identical. As I said, assuming that it's ethical and moral. So we're not talking about evil. We're not talking about bad things. So assuming if you have all good work, which is not unethical in any way, among all the good works, is there any work which is higher or is there any work which is lower? And according to Vedanta, there is no difference. So it really doesn't matter what you are doing. What does matter is how you are doing it. So, and that's the point Vivekananda hammers very strongly throughout his teaching, was that there is no reason, he in fact he gives this example, that a cobbler who makes shoes and a king who rules over a kingdom. Now, which is higher, ruling and administering a kingdom or just mending shoes? Well, we might be tempted to say, well, that's more important, and this is, well, just mending shoes. Now, that's a value system we impose upon activity. But in reality, there is no difference. Because, as Swami Vivekananda put it, you ask one who is mending shoes to go and rule a kingdom, maybe that person most probably won't be able to do it. But you ask a king to go and mend their shoe, that person won't be able to do it either. So this person can do what the other doesn't, and the other person can do what this can't. So each is great in their own way. And as far as being enlightened is concerned, as far as realizing God is concerned, as far as realizing one's own true self is concerned, one can realize that truth as much by mending their shoes with a proper attitude as by ruling a kingdom. So there is no such thing as some work being more important than some other work. There's this one nice incident. One's Holy Mother, Sharda Devi, she visited the early days of the monastery in Calcutta, in Belur Math. So she was visiting from Calcutta. And by that time, several novices had joined. As I said, these were the early years, so the order was still small. And many of the direct disciples of Ramakrishna were still living. And Swami Premananda, a great disciple of Ramakrishna, was the manager of Belur Math. And Holy Mother once came, and so she was just going around the monastery in Belur Math. And so Swami Premananda took her to the area where they were preparing for that day's lunch. And a group of brahmacharis, group of novices were sitting there. They were cutting vegetables for cooking that day. And Swami Premananda told Mother, he said, look, these are, and all of them were university graduates, many of them were very highly qualified, academically qualified, and they were just sitting there cutting vegetables. And so Mother, Swami Premananda said, look, Mother, these are such intelligent young men, and they're just sitting here doing nothing, just cutting vegetables. And then one among those novices, he just looked, and Mother was smiling as she was listening to this. And then there's one of the novices, who later on, by the way, became Swami Tyagananda, the one who translated, you find that book in the bookstore called Sri Ramakrishna, the Great Master. It's one of the big biographies of Ramakrishna. He translated it from Bengali into English later on. He was a great scholar. So he was a novice then. And so when that comment was passed, so this novice then says, he says, our goal in life is to please the Divine Mother, is to realize God. And that can be done as much by cutting vegetables properly as by writing books or giving lectures. It makes no difference. And Mother was very pleased with that answer. And I think as students of Vedanta, I think that's something very important to keep in mind. And to a large extent, although not fully, but large extent, the dignity of labor, that I think is more recognized in Western culture than in some of the Eastern societies, which have long had this the hierarchies, that's higher and lower kind of a thing. Again, something inbred in human culture, so it's not as if it's totally absent in the West. But still, this is something that as Vedanta students, we need to be alert about, that when we try to make this thing about this is a higher work or a lower work, we need to immediately remind ourselves. And that answer by that novice was great. He said, the goal of life is to realize God, and you can do it. If I do whatever I'm doing, even if you are able to vacuum your home in a spirit of karma yoga, that can make you enlightened. Not necessarily one who is all the time studying the Gita and the Upanishads and say, well, that will make me enlightened. Perhaps not. So again, it's not what you do, but how you do it that really makes all the difference. So two principles of work that are very helpful. And first is freedom. Now, in life, if we get to do the kind of things that we love, I mean, that's great. That's wonderful. We are very fortunate. We are lucky. It's time to celebrate. But oftentimes, all of us are not so fortunate that everything that we have got to do is something that we love. Sometimes, many of the things we have got to do are boring, or some of the things we have to do we just hate doing. So what are our choices? What do we do? Now, if we begin to hate the work that we have to do, we lose a lot of energy. A lot of exhaustion that comes in our lives is not so much by the work that we have to do, but by this kind of often suppressed anger, hatred, frustration, dissatisfaction. That is what kind of sucks away all energy from life. And that's a problem. So the more we are able to do work because we are enjoying it, the greater is the freedom we begin to experience in life. And therefore, as they say, if you don't get to do what you like, you must find a way to like whatever it is that you have got to do. And if we really make an effort, and the word really is very important here. Let's say, if there's something you really hate doing, you don't like it, but if you kind of really make an effort to find something good in that, and just focus on that good, you might not hate it so much. And there is hardly anything in life which you can say is like, this is totally bad. And as I said, I'm still talking about ethical good work. So if we make an effort, we'll always find some benefit, something good in it. And this is not just about work, it's also about people. Again, we often try to, it's very simplistic to just divide people between good and bad. Who's an evil person, good person. That's very childish. Again, if you look very deeply, even someone we hate, if we look deeply, we might begin to see something good in that person. Now that doesn't mean that you just go and hug and make that person a big friend of yours. You don't have to. I mean, but at least that hatred, animosity that may be in our heart against any person, that kind of gets diluted a little bit. But again, because even through hatred, a lot of our energy gets lost. And so if we can minimize the hatreds in our lives, the happier we will be. So the goal is to try to love everything that we have to do. Because when we love what we do, we experience greater freedom. If we love what we do, we work as masters, not work as slaves. That's the idea. Because duty, while all wonderful things can be said about duties, at a deeper level, there is a way to do work with a higher attitude. Doing work out of a sense of duty is great, but still there is something about it. Suppose you say, well, I'm doing this, why? Well, it's my duty to do it. It's still, you're not doing it completely out of freedom, because you're doing like, well, that's my duty to do it, but which sometimes gives you the feeling, well, if I had any choice, I would rather have not done it, but what to do? It's my duty. So can we rise above just this compulsion of duty and try to do something because we really enjoy doing it, we love doing it? Duty can become a burden. Duty can become a bondage. This is what Swami Vivekananda said. Duty can become, he says, duty can become a disease with us. It drags us ever forward. It catches hold of us and makes our whole life miserable. It is the bane of human life. This duty, this idea of duty, is the midday sun which scorches the innermost soul of mankind. They're pretty strong words. Again, if you want to hear more, here is what he continues this way. Look at these poor slaves to duty. Duty leaves them no time to say prayers, no time to bathe. Duty is ever upon them. They go out and work, duty is on them. They come home and think of the work for the next day. Duty is on them. It is living a slave's life, at last dropping down in the street and dying in harness like a horse. This is duty as it is understood. You begin to think about it. As I said, at no stage in life we are free from duties. When we are children, our parents keep on telling, that's your duty to do it. You start going to school, your teachers tell you that's your duty to do it. So your duty as a student, your duty as a child. Then of course when you grow up, and then you have a duty towards your Valentine, you have a duty towards your friends, you have duty towards your family. Then of course when you start a family, then you have duties towards your children. Then you have, and your parents start aging, then you have duties towards your parents. And then of course, then you become a grandparent yourself, then you have duties towards your grandchildren. It never ends. The only way it seems to end is then when we die. So that's the question. How much do I want my life to be just pushed from behind, like, this is your duty, this is your duty, this is your duty? I mean, that's not freedom. That's not the way to enjoy life. Now, at the same time, it doesn't seem like, well, we can be free from any of these. So it's not like, as I said, even if you leave all this and go into a forest and say, I'm just going to think of God, but there are duties connected with one who renounces everything. So duty can follow you in top of a mountain tops or in a cave. You're never free. So the only way you can be free from duty is to start looking at the work you have to do in a very different way, with different eyes. That's the only way duty can go. So duty is not really something coming at us from outside. Duty is how I look upon the work that I do. And since it's in my hands, therefore, to see how I see the work that I have to do, and what do I see it as just a kind of a drudgery, a duty, or it's something that, no, this is something I love doing. This is something I enjoy doing. The second thing, the first principle is work out of freedom. And the second principle, which is connected with the first, is making an effort to work in a very detached way. Oftentimes we will see that in our lives, we are being pushed from behind. We are being pushed by a sense of duty. Do this, do this, do this. And we are being pulled from in front by our ambition, by our hopes, by our expectations, our own expectations from ourselves, and the expectations of people around us. What my family expects from me, what my friends expect from me, what my country expects from me. So there are these weight of expectations pulling us from front, and there is this duties pushing us from behind. You have no freedom of movement then. Sometimes if you go of course here there is not so much a problem, but even here sometimes if you are in a very rush hour, if you go you take the T when it's extremely crowded, you just have to stand. The people from behind just kind of push you, and there are people in front of you just kind of barely standing. It's much more in overpopulated places. I mean Asia, in India, rush hour, if you go to take the local commuter rail, you can see how much. So there is a lot of pushing and pulling from both sides. No freedom. In a very subtle way, that kind of thing is happening already in our lives. We are being pushed by these duties, pulled by hopes and expectations. And that's why we don't feel that freedom, that spontaneity in our lives. And therefore, we need to find a way of how to deal with these things. So, expressing freedom and trying to work in a detached way. And there are two ways Swami Vivekananda stresses in how to practice that kind of detachment. One way is what he calls work for work's sake. In the Gita, there is this phrase, karyam ityeva yat karma, that doing good work because it is good to do good. No other motive should be there behind it. No other expectation, if I do this, people will like it, people will appreciate it. That's great. If you're doing it something out of expectation of praise, you will get it or you may not get it. But either way, you're bound. But if you say, I'm going to do this because it is good to do good. It is the right thing to do the right thing. I don't care even if people don't notice it. I don't care if no one expresses a gratitude towards me, but I will do what is right. That's one way. The second way, for those who believe in a personal God, those who have this innate love for a spiritual ideal, for them, another way would be, I do this out of love for God. That I have been put in this situation in life through God's will, that the talents and energies and strength that I have, again has come through God's will. So whatever I'm doing it out of love for God. In fact, a devotee says, I really can't do anything. I'm just being an instrument. The more the I gets out of the way, the freer we become. In fact, the problem ultimately is this I. In reality, it's God who does everything. That's how a devotee thinks. That the more I forget that I'm doing it, the more I think I'm just an instrument. Or if I cannot think it that I'm an instrument right now, even if I think that I'm the one who is doing things, let me, as often as I can, or at least before retiring to bed, before going to bed, before sleeping, let me offer everything at the feet of God and say, everything that I did today, I tried to do it as an offering to you. I may not have remembered you, God. I may have forgotten you often. But now, before going to sleep, I'm offering everything at your feet. If one can truly, again, it's not just the words that you say. Words really don't matter at all. But if you really mean, if this is what you can do, whichever way you would like to do it, you will see. You will sleep well, for one thing. Lot of times our sleep is not of a much higher quality. Nowadays there are these sleep apps, if you like. You can see the quality of your sleep, and you will see if you have one of these sleep apps and you're kind of monitoring the quality of your sleep, you will find if before going to sleep, if you are able to offer, truly surrender everything at the feet of God, and then just say, give me the strength that tomorrow I'll do better. The kind of stupid things I did today that I wouldn't do tomorrow. And then just like a little baby would go to sleep in mother's lap, just go to sleep. You will sleep better. You will feel better next morning. That's the utilitarian approach. But even from a spiritual standpoint, you will find that you will get closer to God. You will go closer to your spiritual ideal. It's only then that work can become a spiritual practice. If we don't do this, then our life is always going to be divided. There's always like, oh, this is my work thing, and this is my spiritual thing. Now, at some point, that wall has to be broken. You can't lead a double life. So while externally, it's great, separation of church and state, very helpful, wonderful, great. But internally, that separation has to go. Internally, a spiritual seeker is a spiritual seeker always. Even if you are doing what is seen as a secular work, even secular work can be done in a spiritual way. Although you don't have to flaunt it outside, you don't have to go on telling others why it has become spiritual to you. Just keep it inside. True religion, true spirituality is inside. It's not about proclaiming anything to the world outside. But if we can bring about that internal change, our lives will be truly blessed. So these are some of the thoughts that come to mind as we grapple with this dilemma of to do or not to do. Something that all of us have to face every day. And the more we are able to come to peace with our own selves about the various things that we have to do in life, find how they are connected with the ultimate goal of life as we perceive it. And then you'll find a greater harmony within our own system, body, mind, the different thoughts. The more harmony inside, you will be an agent of harmony in the external world as well. A person who is peaceful and in harmony within becomes immensely powerful. Such a person can restore harmony. We may not be as powerful as Jesus or Buddha, who could influence generations of people. But in our own little way, to the extent we are able to experience that peace, love, and harmony within, we will be able to influence one other person or two others, our own family, our own small circle of friends. So that's also a way of serving the world. That first, experience that deep peace within. You don't even have to do anything. If you are completely peaceful and joyful, even without your doing anything, you'll already be helping other people. And so, striving for this kind of a spiritual progress is doing good not only to ourselves, but also to the immediate circle of people we live with and we move amongst. So there's a lot to think about. So I would encourage you to reflect on this, because this is something that's very, very helpful in our daily life. Om Jananim Saradam Devim Ramakrishnam Jagatgurum Padapadme Tayo Shritva Pranamami Muhur Muhu. We bow down to Sri Ramakrishna and Holy Mother.